It is the haven because it's a place to go for solitude, for relaxing. The NHS staff have found it impeccable for their mental health, and we get that feedback from them. It is for feedback that we get is the NHS staff value it being opened up to them as well. And people who are waiting, whether it's X-ray or something more terrifying, waiting for results, the patients, their families visiting can hang out here. It's actually open to anybody that crosses the threshold, and that's quite new. That's only, is it a year ago, Greg?
Year and a half, yeah.
So what happened how we gave birth, he and I, to this garden? We were in the hospice a lot. His twin sister was dying and a friend's husband. So we were in here a lot, and I was shocked. I'd never been in this hospital for anything, and we're local. I was shocked there was nowhere to take Cynthia out in a wheelchair or a bed. And we got it into our heads, this is not on. We live in this area. So I said, this nurse pointed out this big soggy wasteland in the middle of the hospital and said, we would love that to be a garden. And I'll never forget her name, Teresa Kiecher, German name, Teresa. And I said to Teresa, as you do, I am your fairy godmother. Leave that with me and I will get you a garden. But we both come from professions that leadership roles. So we found ourselves, and Greg and I as a team, and I'm great with the vision, well, sort of, and he's really good at grant applications, getting money in. So we got on board very quickly. The NHS, the press, and some local politicians. I had political connections, of course. And it was to get a photo shoot in the Dunfermline press to raise the profile of this wasteland. And we've got a great photo away at the beginning of the Facebook page where you'll see them all there, a team that are right behind it. We have worked for 7 years on this, and the vision's changed, of course. It has changed from being a garden for the hospice to a garden for everybody. So we are going to, are you wanting to speak before you take them outside?
Yes, we'll explain the process we went through, and then we'll have a look through the garden, and then we'll talk a bit more about the garden's features. It's not just a garden where, oh, a garden, let's have some plants, let's have some flowers. There's been a lot of thought about the detail of how it works, and so we'll go into all of that. But if you think about the process, we had no idea how a garden might be created here. And we thought when we wrote to the NHS that we'd have a fight on our hands to persuade them that the hospice should have a garden. We got to that meeting and we were asked the question, so you think the hospice should have a garden, do you? We said yes, so do we, they said. And so a senior palliative care manager worked with us. We set up a wee committee to further the whole thing. And we were really fortunate that she was keen and also had a strong vision that something good had to be created. It wasn't just an outdoor space, it had to be something that kind of you can go into and had a certain wow factor to it. That was always the ambition in our minds for the garden to work. So
am I allowed to interrupt?
You are.
The biggest difference you'll see is instead of flat gardens, which were beautiful, that we had a lot of help with pathways for wheelchairs and beds, we had a vision of trees which help the air quality in a hospital setting. Finished.
So because we had to raise a lot of money, because the first thing was the ambition, the next thing is where's the money coming from for this ambition? So the NHS Endowment Fund put up £1,000 to commission the designer. We wanted the garden to be properly designed. We gave the designer a brief in some detail, and we modelled that brief on the way the day room worked in the hospital. The day room worked on the basis that it was a chance for patients to get away from their bedside, and in the day room there was clusters of seating so that different families and visitors and so on can see their own loved one semi-separately. And we thought we need to replicate that in the garden as an outdoor space in the same sort of way. So we got a designer on board, and he was really on board. He was really listening to what was required, and that was pretty much essential. So he came up with a proposal that cost in excess of £50,000, and we said to him, can you get that back to 50,000? So there was a few tweaks made to the design, and we set about raising money, and the NHS said, we will give you 25,000 from the endowment fund, the hospice endowment fund, but you need to go out and find another 25,000. And I'll tell you, it was a lot easier than I expected. All sorts of people we didn't know.
Five council.
All sorts of people we didn't know. Like a woman says, I'm going to run a marathon for you. Somebody else says, I'm going to run a pub quiz for you. We didn't ask them to do it. They just, appeared. And there's also quite a few fairly well-known charitable foundations. There's a good local charitable foundation, the Carnegie Trust here. We got money from them. So we even got a situation where we would apply for a grant from one organisation. They said, we've got no money, but we'll pass your request over to this other one who does have money. And next thing happens, the cheque comes through the door, So it was a lot easier than you think to raise that money. So we got our 50,000, and it was a bit weird that this wasn't NHS mainstream money. So there was a question as how do we procure the contractor? And that question went into the NHS system somewhere and came back out. You'll better go through the official procurement process. So we had to give our money to them in order to go through the procurement process. But it was nominally them. In practice, we called the shots, we checked the contracts, and when we signed up the contractor, we basically said, we've got 50 grand. If there's things need extra money, something we'll have to give. And we ended up, for example, that certain bits didn't get planted up because we didn't have enough money for that. We said, we'll do that later. And the contractor was great. We never had any arguments about money at all. We were very lucky that way. Our ambition knew no bounds really. We looked out a stone carver who carved a sculpture for the middle of the garden. The challenges there were something we could afford, something you could physically get into the garden through a hospital corridor. And
children could interact with going over, under, through. People think it's a big H, and it's not. It's not H for hospital or anything. And it's cemented in so that there can never be an accident. But more importantly, the design was to represent gardens, and you'll see that.
We went to the local garden centre to ask about plants for the bit that we decided we would plant. And without even having to negotiate it, we were offered a 10% discount on everything we bought and free delivery. And we've been getting that ever since.
And it was important to us that it wasn't the big chains of garden centres, it was a local, private, family concern.
Yeah, they kind of bought into what we were doing. They were very supportive of it. And that has been a big help to us to have
It's
that.
Fairley's Garden in Cairneyhill. And we don't make a point of advertising them, we're very quiet about it because that's not what the garden's about.
So, and Annie set up a Facebook page. We were getting a lot of interest in what was going on, and we thought the Facebook page was a good focal point for doing that.
Us old people.
We had to recruit volunteers, and we thought, where are we going to get volunteers to look after this garden? So what we decided to do was make up little cards that we left in the hospice with a box to post the card in, And the card was about if you're interested in volunteering, just tell us on this little card, tell us how to get in touch with you, post a wee card in the box, and we'll be back in touch. We've still got volunteers now that came to us that way. So that was how we started the volunteer thing. And one of the things I found a bit surprising was that we appeared at one of the meetings with the NHS with a plan for all the things that had to happen for the garden to be there. And I said in the meeting, so we reckon this will take about a year. And the manager just said, you'll never do this in a year. And we just said, well, why don't we try? And we'll see. And we actually did it. And the reason that it was possible was that they're so busy with many other things. For us, this was it. And we kept the thing going. When we saw the next thing that had to be done, we pushed for it to be done. And so there was no gaps. And there was a lot of overlap tasks and so on. So we kept the thing going. And on the day when I said to the palliative care manager, we could actually get this contract running now, she thought, can we? It was almost as if she couldn't believe that we were ready. I said, yeah, get the contract accepted, we're ready to go. And you know, when we were standing on the third floor, looking down, there was a lot of yellow lines getting laid out as the contractor started planning out the garden, and it was a very special moment in our time. So, before we talk about the design and the detail of the garden, probably the best thing is to have a slow walk through. Gradually, you'll see it's an L shape, and at the other end you'll come to a shelter, and we'll continue the presentation in the shelter. But take your time to go through the garden and try to notice what the features of it are. What we'd like to do now then is to highlight a little bit about the vision that we had with the NHS, very much a shared vision with them for something a wee bit special and practical as well. The first thing was that it had to be possible to get beds in here, and even things like allow for a width of paving that 2 beds can pass. And wheelchair access, obviously, if you have bed access, you've got wheelchair access. The widened door, you may not have noticed, but the door is in 2 parts, so it can open wide enough for a bed as well. Solid pathway throughout the garden so that people can get round it properly.
Now, if somebody was asking how did they get access, how did you get them in here with the big lifting things, the paving stones and the machines?
All right, yeah, well the contractor was obliged to put a false surface down on the corridor from the entrance there to a loading bay, which was just about 30 yards along the corridor. And they got a mini digger in here coming through on the corridor, and all the kind of borrowing in and borrowing out of stuff and trolleys and whatever. They knew exactly what they were doing, and they made very light work of it all. Even things like bringing in a big water butt there for any cement work that we had to do, which was quite considerable actually, quite a lot of cement.
Yeah.
The seating, you will have seen that mainly the seating is in small clusters that are designed to be semi-private. Initially that was all the seating we had in the garden. This shelter wasn't in the original design, this is something done after. It's interesting to know that the innovations since the first incarnation of the garden all came from the nursing staff in the hospice. The need for this shelter and the shelter at the door, having lights.
Oh yes,
as
the
well.
lights in the evening,
And,
they're uplighters. Hence the trees look at their best. But there's also pillars that are like moonlight. And when I spoke to a member of staff a couple of weeks ago, she said, "Oh, I'm here on the late shift, especially autumn and winter. I see it, and it's stunning."
Yeah. The contemplation area that's just behind Yasmin there, that was an extra as well, again on a suggestion from one of the nurses. And you know, when the suggestion came in, we would go and raise the money and get it done. And the same contractors came back. We just negotiated with that contractor, and there was no going through NHS procurement anymore. It was just our money straight to that contractor, and it worked out fine. And the NHS just do that and just let us go on with it.
But let's be honest here. When they very first met us, right at the beginning, you got a few old people talking about making a garden. They took a while to learn that we had done leadership roles in the past. We knew how to work with committees. We knew how to apply for grants. We weren't just a wee group of old people. So the trust was earned.
What was hospital management like? Contractors coming in?
They were great.
They
They so
objecting
appreciated having a
and
garden.
critical,
You'll
Yeah.
see kind of neglected wee bits of garden. But this is a jewel in there at £5. This, and you might want to mention they got a visit with what's his name, Mr. COVID.
Yeah, but what I was going to do is to try and answer Alistair's question. There is an estates department that looks after the maintenance of the building. The contractor had to liaise with that department on all the details of how, you know, the corridor was to be protected, and what was allowed, what was not allowed, when they could be in and when they couldn't be in, and getting access through the loading bay, and having a wee compound sectioned off at the loading bay. All of that had to be negotiated with them. It was really about the only role the estates department played. Apart from that, they just stood well back, and they told us to make sure the manholes can be accessed. There's one of 3 manholes that had to be accessed. So apart from that, we were just kind of gone.
Can I ask sorry, a question? What did you do for water? Was that a problem?
We got 2 taps put in. Yeah, we actually tried running a watering system, but it was a disaster. Some bits of the garden were getting too wet, some bits were not getting enough water, and it ended up just, it's easier to water where needed. Every week you check what needs water, and we do it manually.
And Peter raised the point, we weren't allowed to have stagnant water in the garden. We can't have a bird bath or fountain or anything. But he said, but you've got a water butt. How did you get that?
Well, we didn't tell anybody.
Exactly.
And that's your point.
Well, they know what hurt them.
Some of the volunteers don't appreciate that rainwater is so much better, especially your pots. We don't do the whole garden with watering cans, but it's so much better if you can use rainwater.
So from the initial concept, we wanted a central feature in the garden, which you saw as a tree of life sculpture. And the same stone carver did that wave sculpture there. And you'll also maybe have noticed 1 or 2 little pieces of stone like that. There are 10 stones around the garden with thistles carved on, and there are 10 stones around the garden with acorns carved on. Anybody got any idea why we might have done that?
Was it a gift?
Yeah.
Well, we thought at the design stage, what about a children's play area? Because we knew in the day room that there was often children came with the adults to see the patient. And we thought, well, what's in this garden for kids? Do we want a sandpit and stuff like that? And we ended up saying, no, we don't. And the other thing that from my working life that I had a very strong conviction about was, kids don't only play in play areas. Kids get fed up with play areas. Kids play everywhere. So you've got to try and think a bit more broadly about what's in it for kids. So our idea was, when kids came in, to be able to say to them, now there are a lot of stones round the garden with acorns and thistles on. See how many you can find. We don't tell them how many there are, because you then are not failing if you don't get them all. They come back and tell you, oh, I found 7. Oh, great.
Yeah.
You know?
Can
The problem with that is that if people don't know that that's there to do, it won't necessarily occur to folks. So we haven't quite cracked that in this wider use of the hospital way. When it was a hospice, all the nurses knew, so they were able to tell patients the kids. So we haven't quite cracked it, but the idea is that there's something of interest for kids. But the other point about it is I've had my grandchildren in here. They just want to come and help. They want a hoe in their hand and stuff like that.
But we don't really do that, Greg, with volunteers. They don't all
Oh
bring
no,
in their
no,
family.
no. There are no. This garden's not for people to garden. It's the volunteers that do the gardening.
It's for that haven.
But just when I happen to be looking after one of my grandchildren, she just wants to help. And what I'm trying to highlight is that what kids get interested in a space is what they get interested in. It's not what we think we're going to be.
And can I digress in the whole children thing, because I would have mentioned this at the end about part of the inspiration was in the lounge in the hospice. We spent hours in there over the days and weeks. Now, there was one granddad in particular, probably was about our age at the time, and he had young children there, and he was trying to amuse them, and it was a red hot day. The sun streamed in this lounge, and there was nowhere to take the kids. And I watched them. I've come from an education background, so I'm very focused on children. And I thought, this is a sin. That granddad, his daughter was dying, so the husband was with his daughter, and he had the kids, and he had nowhere to take them. There was a car park, and people hanging around smoking at the entrance at the time. So that was part of the inspiration and the link to the children's activities.
Yeah, and having something for kids to do. I want to say something about the planting now, because it's not just whatever we fancy, put it wherever you fancy. There's a lot more thought went into it now. The first thing is the imperative, especially in the days of the hospice, when you know that a typical hospice patient might be in the hospice for 3 or 4 days, or maybe 2 or 3 weeks, but not a very long time. So for us, the garden had to work every day of the year, and we're not gardening experts. You know, what's Gardener's World and stuff, but we just kind of figure it out as we go. But we decided that there needed to be a lot of evergreen. There needed to be a strong structure of greenness all the year round, and that's what you see. We wanted a lot of trees. Not many of the trees are evergreen. There are a few, but there's a lot of the shrubs are evergreen, and we have also gradually, as we've kind of observed the garden, relied less on bringing in bedding plants at different times of year, and more having perennials that come into their own at different times of the year. So you'll see a certain amount of autumn colour. In the spring there's just as much colour, and in the summer there's just as much colour. It's just different plants. So some plants that are half asleep just now are in their best phase in the spring and so on. So we're gradually just kind of with trial and error building that up in that sort of way, to try and mean that the garden's always a pleasant space to be in. Now one thing that I want to highlight that could be a tricky one. There was a certain demand coming from different places for the garden to have a memorial purpose. And right at the very start, the NHS thought we were wanting that to be kind of garden. And we just said, no, this is about the living, this is not about the dead, this garden. And so we were of one mind on that. But what we got when the garden was up and running and it was for the hospice, nurse would say, we would like a tree to hang ribbons on. in memory and so on. Now for a while, we had a dead tree here to hang ribbons on, but it got really tatty. And when this shelter got built, it got damaged. And that was the ideal opportunity to get rid of it.
But we've kept all the ribbons and mementos that people did hang on it, in case you just never know. Somebody might say, where did my ribbon go? So we've got them all washed and in a bag.
Well, there was an idea to make it into a collage that might go on the wall of the shelter. There are 2 plants in this garden. In fact, there's 3 plants in this garden. Have a memorial purpose. One of them is that rose bush right there, and you'll see at the bottom of it a little stone with a hat. Now that was actually one of the members of staff, who was a very much loved colleague of a group of staff. They came and said, we'd like a memorial plant for the garden here.
Can I
And
add
they
to
said,
that?
well, just let me finish my...
It's hard to know whether I can get it in.
Well, but you don't know what I'm going to
I
say
know.
next. Well, I've now lost the thread here. Yeah, we said to them, you can come and, they donated that plant. But we said, it can't show for other people as a memorial plant. It can show as that for you, but it's not for anyone else. And that's the same for another 2 plants in this garden. They have a memorial reason to be there, but nobody else other than the people that donated them know that. So
And
that's the way that we
And in this
compromise.
instance, the nurse was like 41 that had died. She had young children. It was just so emotional. They felt so emotional about her that we certainly couldn't refuse. But the roses don't do well in this garden, and we said, let's put it in a pot. And that's why it's in a pot.
Yeah, very good. The other thing then to say about the planting and so on is that we are trying our best to keep the garden light for maintenance. So we consider it's quite a big space, but it doesn't take all that much to maintain it actually. And something we've got to say to volunteers, you won't need that hoe today. If somebody goes round, grabs a hoe, here can we do some hoeing? Oh, you won't need a hoe today. We're a bit worried they're going to hoe the tops of bulbs coming through and stuff like that. So there's a lot of deadheading, there's a lot of watering, there's a lot of cleaning, bird poo, mould is starting to accumulate on the paving. This paving is done like the Forth Bridge. We have a water hose. We start at that far end, gradually work through to this end, and then go back and keep it. So there's tasks like that. We decided not to have real grass because that would be quite heavy maintenance responsibility, and here probably muddy. So the sculpture in the middle is on artificial grass. Maybe if we had a time again, it would have been a more durable surface there, but no grass to mow and stuff like that.
It's not everybody's
So-
love.
And we're always trying to see what we can improve. So that's basically it.
So
Your
the
question.
section, before you open to questions, the section on feedback, we've had amazing feedback from all the different uses, but two that stand out in particular. One is on the Facebook page, and it's an old couple on the swing seat and their 2 daughters, and she tells you in 1 minute what the garden's for. She just describes it. If you can be bothered looking up the Facebook page, it's a bit of video with this old couple on the swing chair, and it turns to the daughters and they say what the worth of the garden is. Another one is we were stopped at the door one day by a lady with a drip on a wheelie drip, and she had a dressing gown on, and she said, I'm about to go into the garden. I have, if I'm lucky, 2 or 3 days left, and I'm in here down in the lift 3 times a day, regardless of the weather. And I found that so moving, that because we don't get a lot of feedback, we're not in a position of asking people, and it's taboo to have hoses and tools and people coming in, so we miss out on that. But the feedback through Facebook has been lovely, heartwarming when people tell you that their dad died in the hospital or whatever, or they've had severe treatment, blah blah. So please look at our Facebook page and do share it for me. We've got over 1,000 members, but it means if we have a big open day, we can let everybody know. Well, it's not we, I mean the NHS, it's their garden. They're very aware of that. And I think that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, we think it's their garden, they think it's our garden. Anyway,
Questions?
The planting is really amazing, and I was just wondering.
The what?
Planting.
Oh, the planting.
Sorry, it's my accent.
Oh, no, not at all. It's my hearing. Planting.
I wasn't expecting.
Oh, you think it's amazing?
I think it's really amazing and it's really beautiful. I'm just wondering, was it the designer that
No.
had control over what the planting would be?
to start with, yeah,
Huh?
the initial
Yeah.
planting was the designer. And
His focus
he
was
even,
on the structure, though.
he even said to me as we were going through the design, there were some bushes here, and he said, "Do you want to tell me which bushes you want left?" And I said to him, "No, I want you to decide that as part of your scheme, rather than me or anybody else tell you." So things like that bit, there's 2 or 3 bushes round the corner there that were left from what was here before.
But you'll see on the
But
Facebook page
everything else,
what was there
I'm not going to answer the question.
at length.
Every,
They
I'll
always-
direct
they
this
always do
question to.
yeah, that's right. Every main section of the garden had a uniform planting. Like you'll see a little bit of hebe just there. That whole bed was hebe in the initial design. So all of it was like that, where there were beds were lavender, beds were skinny, and so on. And we have gradually altered all of that. Partly in the garden in the winter.
No.
But it was something that I think we were talking about was we try to think about this building 3 stories high, wrapping around this garden on all sides, and we just thought that's a problem. But actually, the light, because it's shiny walls, relatively shiny, smooth walls, the light bounces off those walls. And they're actually warm walls because it's a hospital with heated inside. So we've got a bit of a microclimate here, a certain amount of shelter, despite the windiness you felt when you came in. So the walls do some good, as well as block sun. And we get things growing in parts of this garden that they're not supposed to grow. They're supposed to be in a sunny place, but they grow here anyway. We just kind of hope for the best, you know. We have our failures. Yeah,
Do you work with patients directly and the hospital staff like occupational therapists?
we don't work with patients at all.
Do you work with OTs at all?
Not directly, no. Mainly the management of the hospital to start with. Our liaison with the hospital now is the practical folk that can get things done for you, like the wee laminated sign that I had today. We got that done for us. If we need the loading bay door unalarmed, we ask for that to be done. So our liaison is mainly practical. And obviously, crucially also, we have liaison for applying for a bit more money now and again. But we don't have any patient-facing role. And we are a group set up and constituted as a charity. We are not NHS volunteers as such. You don't go through the application process and get vetted or anything of that sort. Our volunteers are self-selecting. You want to have a go at volunteering in the garden? Okay, come in and join in, see how you get on, see if you like it. And obviously, if we ever saw somebody being silly, we'd do something about that, but we never get that. So,
Can I ask if Did you do a lot of work in the beginning to explain to staff in the hospital about what was happening in the garden?
No.
No.
The fact at the start with it was for the hospice only.
It's the hospice.
We had a good liaison with the nurses in the hospice. They all knew what was going on. They were all looking forward to the thing. They would bring patients down on the bed and stuff like that. That was very close liaison. And when I was saying that it was nurses that suggested the shelter, it was a nurse that suggested the contemplation area, they were nurses from the hospice. That's where that came from. So now it's actually taken a bit of banging heads to get the management of this hospital to agree to have the little green signs that you saw that got us here.
Can I ask? Oh, so were you going to?
Oh, no, it's all good. Not ask a question.
Oh, right. Can I ask how much of the money was spent on hard landscaping and how much on plants? And did it come kind of almost like this?
I'd say that this paving was easily more than half the cost.
Right.
Easily more than half. Plants
And then,
probably about 10,000 out of 50,000.
alright,
Yeah.
fifth on plants.
As years I remember. No, the paving had to be the core, and you can see that it's decent paving. It's nice looking paving, and it's intricate.
Oh, it's good though.
You know, and even details like having a cup for the manhole cover. All of that costs money.
I can imagine now though, I feel like it'd be a lot more than that. Unfortunately, I think, yeah, since it was done, I think the price will have gone up a lot. So I guess I'd bear that in mind.
Something else, if you're thinking of doing anything parallel to this, is that when we wrote a fairly detailed brief for the design, only one person came forward to be a designer. You know, there wasn't loads of people saying, oh, that's for me. It was almost like we were writing folk off. And when it came to going out to tender for doing the work, only 2 contractors came forward. Because the landscape contractors are used to coming in and saying to their customer, we'd like to do this and we'd like to do that. But here they were being told, not what you want, it's what we want. And that was putting them off. So the company whose designer designed the garden was the company that won the contract. They had bought into what we were doing. The other company that had the tender was a much higher price, and it was like, oh, we're going to have to go to all that bother. We're going to watch this too. You know, they basically priced themselves out of the job. So I think the trick would be get involved with a company or a designer that buys into what you're trying to do, gets really committed to what you're trying to do. And that was something that we were really lucky with.
You've done a brilliant job here, you and Anne and both. And you're young yet.
Yeah, we'll join you if you're still there.
I suppose well, wee bit. NHS have got a big thing about green at the moment. Is this are you interested in taking this further than just this hospital?
We're not interested in.
Or would you be
doing
willing
it.
to like
We'd be happy to
support that?
support people and kind of explain what we did and trying to tune in how what they're trying to do and help in that way. But not in a hands-on. No, we don't want to expand our organisation to do any more than look after this garden. This is enough.
I think
for
it's
our-
reasonable, yeah.
For our age.
Oh, you're young.
I'll definitely, I've been asking them for a lot of advice just because of the kind of projects that we want to do moving forward are really similar to this. So asking them about kind of what the procedures were and how they managed to get the contracts and collaborate with NHS and stuff is really important.
You've never been at a presentation, have you?
Sorry?
You've not been at one of our presentations before.
Yeah, I guess I've heard, from volunteering though, I've heard a lot about it, and then I've also been to the AGM as well. So
It's worth mentioning maybe with Yasmin's connection that there's spin-off things have happened here, can happen here. Yasmin arranged for a group of school children to come to the garden. They were the school's eco warriors,
Yeah.
and they were absolutely engaged.
Yeah.
You know, we were showing them little caterpillars on the birch trees, and that was part of how the ecology worked. And what did we decide to do about the caterpillars? We decided to leave them. And the birch trees and whatever predators are starting to get on top of that problem themselves. So we went into stuff like that with the kids, and they were absolutely on it, you know. We've also had choirs singing in here at Christmas time. You know, the garden can have that wider, these moments of wider
Activities.
Yes,
social use.
it shows it.
I was just going to ask, so the wider estate, have they got like gardeners and estate managers for the wider estate?
Yeah, we have estates managers for the wider estate, but their role is really limited to green space. Like, they don't really do much in terms of that. It's mainly just, I think we've got maybe like 2 or 3 full-time staff for kind of mowing the grass,
Mowing
basically.
the grass, yeah.
And that's about, and then there's 2 therapeutic. Yeah, there's 2 therapeutic. Horticultural therapists, right? Is that
Yeah,
that?
there's two.
Yeah, I really think
Yeah.
there should be more.
Cool.
In my opinion, yeah, I think there should be more. I think there should be more gardens. I think there should be more
But you need
emphasis
the
on.
volunteers.
Yeah, I think there should be more emphasis on
Well,
green space for
I can
health.
purely selfish in what I was talking about earlier because
Yeah.
there's 2 courtyard gardens similar. There's much
Yeah.
smaller than this that are over in the mental health area of the hospital here, and the struggle to get like the benefit. You guys come in and you look after this place, whereas the OTs who are meant to run these 2 wee gardens haven't got the time
No.
to put into it.
No.
You know what I mean?
And we
And
don't-
they're going in working with the patients to do it, so it's not about making sure it's all beautiful and all that. That's not.
But the
so-
chief executive and Jason Leach from the COVID telly were going to a meeting, and he said, "What is that?" He looked down. He only saw a bit of this, and she was able to say, "It's a jewel of the crown of Queen Margaret, certainly 5, because it's different. It's not hands-on with patients. It's kept beautifully." And he was gobsmacked. And what were his words, Greg?
Well, he said that every hospital in Scotland should have a garden like this. But what he would do about it, I don't know. I think, Peter, that the key issue actually that you're touching on is how do you get a group of volunteers with this ongoing commitment?
Yeah.
If you're wanting staff to lead it, you've just said it, they don't have the time. And that would be the case here. If somebody among the staff in this hospital was told, can you lead this or can you see that they're doing the right thing? Nobody checks to see whether we're doing the right thing or not. We're just left to it. And the key here then is how do you get that group of volunteers? Because this all started from us as members of the community saying there should be a garden.
But listening to what you're talking about, one of the key for you guys is you're independent from NHS. People can.
It's
come.
a shame though. We don't have connections with NHS except quite what level is Zoe? She's a sort of clerical person.
Chloe.
Chloe.
Yeah, she is a facilities admin.
And
then
you
I'm a
know,
sustainability
that girl
officer.
has been worth her weight in gold. She's our only link with the NHS. More questions?
What was here before?
Sorry?
What was here before the garden?
A big muddy, mossy mess.
Nothing.
There was the odd old bush or tree, but it was totally not used.
Basically, so there's a space identical to this just along the corridor, and you can see what if you want to see what it looked like
And you
before.
couldn't you couldn't walk in it. Well, we did for the photo at the beginning of the Facebook, but you couldn't walk in it. It was sludgy. It was, and you certainly couldn't feel anybody out in it. And there was no access for the public, albeit at the beginning.
Yeah, it was very unpromising.
Yeah, but I think if you get somebody with the skills, for instance, that Greg has, to do that application, getting grants, and you got the money for the designer. So if you've got the guy trying to get the money and you've got a design company that gives you the structure, a lot of people wanted to grow things up, these pillars, but they're beautiful in their own right. And I look back on my days in nursery education, for instance, and there was a guru who lit my fire. She said, the furniture and everything in the room should be natural, and the colour comes from plants and the children's work and the children's clothes, but you need a background of nature. And I've never forgotten that. And that Greg and I have hung on to that with the garden. You know, we don't want to paint pillars and we don't want to grow things up them and fairy lights going across them. We've got beautiful, subtle lighting. So we don't want it to be tacky. Oh dear, what a thing to say.
Can I ask you about your publicity? After your initial publicity about the project, and then you said that, well, Greg was saying that people came to you with money and ideas and how to raise it and things. How did you keep that publicity going?
Well, we didn't do well, did we? Like Dunfermline Fest, we'd had our day. You know, they're only interested in new things, really. But the odd charitable event was publicised, like the dockyards recently, the dockyards money. And I have a friend who's a manager in McDonald's, and I found out they give out a lot of money. A quick phone call and we got £2,000. It's good to know, isn't it?
It's really surprising. I was
It's
used to,
It's also
I was
easy.
used to a situation where when you applied for a grant, you've got to demonstrate you've got 3 years worth of clean accounts, and you've got to do chapter and verse about what you want the money for. With McDonald's, the guy emailed me on a Sunday afternoon. By Monday lunchtime, the money was in.
That's amazing.
Well, it was ridiculous. Quite frankly, it was ridiculous. We were 100% trusting.
Sorry, there you
No,
go.
no, no, no.
Sorry. So you've obviously got quite a lot of local profile, and is that through your Facebook
No.
group as well, or?
What I did was I posted things on all the local, all the billboards. So there was Dalgety Bay billboard, Dunfermline billboard, there's Aberdour, there's sort of West Fife billboards. I got hold of a councillor and said, would you share it on all the billboards you're a member of? So the awareness grew, especially when it was open to the public and anybody. That's the only networking I've done, and I've not been, I mean, we haven't advertised for new volunteers, but we're about to, and I'll use the Facebook to say, low key, we've got space for a couple of, because you don't want a surge of volunteers and they're not really committed and they come and they go. We're into building a really caring group, caring for each other. We do quite a bit of our untrained counselling within our group for each other, as well as with them, and we learn from them as well, and just share a lot of experiences and tears and things, and it has made us bond. So we don't want people fleeting in and fleeting out.
We have a volunteers Christmas lunch, and we usually visit a garden somewhere else around about each year as a kind of team thing that we enjoy doing.
My biggest worry is when you get people coming in and you say, oh yeah, I can do deadheading, and they chop off, you know, all the new buds instead of the dead buds, like the Japanese anemones. The buds and the dead buds look almost identical. And so they can go and with the clippers. That's the last thing we want. We want people who have a look and listen and learn and go gently with us, because most of the volunteers have been there for years now, 7 years.
I have a slightly different take on that, because I find the new volunteers are a bit frightened to do anything in case they do it wrong. And I would rather they had a go at something and did it wrong. And the thing with plants is they grow here. You know, it's quite hard to kill a plant. So if you cut a little bit too much,
It's a balance.
when you're pruning the dogwood, if you cut it a wee bit too far, in about 3 weeks' time, it's back to where it was anyway. So, you know,
And
people can learn.
the other thing they don't do it to you so much. They'll come to me and say, what are we doing today? And I say, I don't know. Let's look. It just looks. I don't want to direct anybody. And we tried, we learned from Rosyth, actually, the blackboard, and put today's tasks. This is too top down for me, you know, and they tend to.
Folk come in and they gradually get to like doing certain things, so they just want to do it. And we encourage spending a lot of time in hospital as well. And one of the things that you saw a guy called Brian working in the corner at the door, building a rockery. We'd always felt that space was, it's the hardest space to grow anything. It was looking horrible. It was one of the last places in the garden that wasn't very good. And we had a lot of money coming our way. And
What we
we thought,
forgot
why
to
don't we
tell
make
you.
a proper rockery? And Brian came in the following week with a little bit of paper saying, I've worked out a design. Which is
We forgot to give them cushions out the box.
so we did. So we just said to him, well, Brian, why don't we just do exactly what you've got in your bit of paper? And he wants to do it himself, so he does do it himself. And when it came to, he needs a lot of rocks, he needs a lot of gravel, we'll go down to Fairley Garden Centre and order them. And he did all that too, and we got it all delivered.
And he just asked me on the way out, I would like this and would like that. What are you thinking? I said, go and do it and give us the invoice. How much have I got to spend? I said, I'll get Greg to email you.
And Brian was one of the volunteers that was always wanting of everything so neat and tidy. But we actually think he's growing in
Mobilia.
his ambition.
It's you couldn't help but be inspired by what you see here, you know, in terms of different ways of growing and the height.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Do you have any problems with like clinical seclusion, you know, like of medical staff complain about, you know, lack of privacy?
Yeah, I was going to ask that because the windows have all
You're
been
overlooked,
screened.
aren't you? Yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause that's the
We
problem I've
haven't-
got, like, you know,
Have you got the
I've
same
had that
problem?
complaint.
people saying, you know, there's treatment room space in the garden, how
There
do you
is,
get around that?
Well,
Design
this
problem.
area is quite cute.
But one of the things that we did at the design stage, we were conscious of that being an issue. So we said to the designer, we want the circulation to be in the middle of the garden away from windows. So none of the paving is close to the buildings, you'll see that. Maybe we should have mentioned that point earlier. And we also, we've got a little maintenance strip all the way around as well. So, I mean, occasionally we are in the back there weeding and whatever else, but no one's felt a need to complain about.
Did you mean the privacy for the people in the rooms?
Yeah.
Yeah, people
patients.
receiving treatment.
The
Yeah.
People
treatment
sitting in the
rooms.
garden,
Uh-huh.
hearing
Yeah.
that confidentially.
Because I would have thought that's a big thing to have got all those windows with there's some sort of kind of reflective thing that
Yeah, I
presumably
think
you can see out but
yeah.
not in.
Because they're all different wards, they manage it differently. So that one, they've decided to put up that screen on that bottom window, and that seems to have like
That's
been
right,
enough
that
for
was
them,
done
In
so-
fact, all
since
along
the
there.
garden came in. being-
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Right. So they because I would have thought that might have been a
Well, we're not allowed
Stock is
music
like-
and the sound of water, never mind the contamination thing, because of that. Sometimes we get a bit hilarious. We're crying with laughter about things, and we realise there's people there. But nobody said to us, and they welcome us with open arms. They come out, staff come out and say, "Oh, I overlooked this garden. I'm so lucky."